Colin Stetson is the composer for The Menu. I'm Matt Noble of Gold Derby. And Colin, I wanted to kick things off by asking you what was the most important choice you made in coming up with the music for this funny, creepy film?
The most important choice.
Yeah.
There's a there's a fair amount of restraint. So I think that overall, like in terms of a practice, it was that. In terms of instrumentation and kind of musical function, I think the thing that ties this particular room together is a um, rhythmic structure, kind of like a scaffolding that's built of pizzicato orchestral strings, pizzicato piano strings, numerous other percussion instruments, and then a few other things for good measure. But the bones of the whole score really um, are those that rhythmically driving kind of this kind of polymetric um, rhythmic structure that holds the whole thing from beginning to end.
Mm. You talked about sort of restraint, and I imagine that might be something that's different when you're scoring a film or something for screen, and when you are like performing music outside of that sort of storytelling sphere. How does using restraint sometimes and taking the music back or choosing not to use music in a particular space make the music more powerful when it is used?
I don't know, I think it's loaded into the wording of the question that you just asked. No, for this one, when you read the script, it almost writes itself musically, really, because there are certain moments. There's a kind of rhythmic structure to the way that the film was written, the whole arc was written, and so there are moments that really are you certain things can't be done before those moments happen. And once those moments happen, it's not now it's okay to gradually start. It's no, now it's like a light switch. So this one more so than, a lot of the time you have a gradual unfolding, that the audience is kind of let in on certain things in dribs and drabs, and the music helps the film go ahead and do that. And this one, there are more or less moments, like very, very uh, clear, concise punctuation throughout the course of the film, where entirely new directions in music and aesthetic elements and sound get to completely come in and alter the balance and the character of the music up until that point. So with restraint, so by saying restraint, what I mean is knowing what can be used and where and up until when and all of that. So yeah.
Like it. The film is the film is a mix of different sort of tones and a mix of different things. You've got like really funny parts, really scary parts, dramatic character moments as well. How do you approach a score when you're dealing with different with tonal shifts like that?
Well, as I said, the basis for it, I mean, when you have something that is covering a lot of ground, it you really can't the music cannot be this disparate, unruly thing that just becomes a kind of Frankenstein of different, for lack of a better term, just kind of genre feeling music. And so coming up with a unifying structure and character for what the music would sound like, what essentially the music was pretty key initially, and then sticking to that, not playing outside of those rules, because then, yeah, when you've got something that can that does go a lot of different ways and can go a lot of different ways. The temptation, I guess, could be to just use whatever means to accomplish those particular needs from moment to moment. And then again, the if you do that, I mean, there are ways to do that where it continues to feel concise and cohesive, and there are ways to do that where obviously it wouldn't. And so that was again the main my main task with this, is making sure that it was all it felt of that the score had a persona, and kept to that.
And like it's interesting because like in this film, like there's a lot of things that don't get said because characters are looking at each other on different tables, and like they're looking into the kitchen, and people from the kitchen are looking back at the audience. So like sort of how did you decide, and the film has a structure around the menu that they're eating as well, how did you decide to do the music when you got so many different characters sort of interacting without talking? Also like was the score sort of worked around the characters or around the dishes, or how did you approach that?
Yes. uh the the so like I said, the in the script and on screen, what I saw as the core of the score's purpose was to more or less be the embodiment of, quote unquote, the menu. And so when I say the menu, I mean the plot that is already underway, that has already been that's been preconceived and set and is starting to unfold as we already when we first join our diners in that first scene. And so the score then gets to be this thing that plays with them throughout the course of the film, but it and they interact with it interacts with them. And so there's moments of really of it kind of shining through particular characters when they're having specific and and deep moments. But all I for my part in helping me along do my job, the whole of it had to be that the score, the music was that plan. It was this plot that we show up in the midst of and watch unfold.
Mm. What sort of did he? I think I read somewhere you used some like interesting instruments and even kitchen utensils were part of how you developed the score. Is that correct?
There are a few different things in here. I like I said, the pizzicato strings and piano are a big element. There are a lot of saxophones and a fair amount of clarinets, so woodwinds do play a pretty integral part in the mix. There's a lot of vocals. There's a very distinct choral element to it all, and there are a couple different disparate instrumentations. There's a bit of a thing called a nickel harpa, which is a Swedish folk instrument. And yes, there's a bit of a presence from the culinary. And so there are things like pitched water glasses that are played very I wouldn't say unconventionally. What I wanted to avoid was not just having kind of like a bang on, pots and pans sort of rhythm, sort of drum on the kitchen sort of vibe. And so where the percussive elements of the kitchen have shown up, they've shown up in more subtle ways. And one of them is in something like the water glasses, where they show up in a few points, especially at the very, very end. And my good friend and frequent collaborator, Greg Fox, who's an amazing percussionist, but also a a very killer metal drummer, and so he is quite literally blasting on an array of like a dozen water glasses in I think in triplicate or quadruplicate in these scenes. So there's just like this kind of like unfolding, burgeoning pointillism of all of these pitched water glasses, this tinking that starts to kind of create this stars in the sky sort of texture on top of everything. And so that's I tried to use these sounds, but in ways that would be not quite so obvious.
Yeah, no, I read about it and I was like, oh, I didn't notice that, but that's really cool.
Yeah.
Like, and the score has a real, like, it's a really beautiful score. There's a real beauty to it. But in fitting with the film, there's also something that's just like a little bit off or creepy a bit. Like, it's sort of beautiful but not beautiful at the same time. Like, sort of, what's something that's important for getting that sort of feel of sort of beautiful but not beautiful?
Being genuinely embracing those different sides, so not pulling any punches when things need to go grotesque, when it needs to be something that is like truly horrific, to not rein that in because because we don't want to be too scary because it's also a comedy. No, I mean, for me it was really just being very sincere about all of the every moment, letting it be what it really was. And so if there's a tense moment, if there's something that where there's like true existential dread, let that really be that thing, not just a hint at it, not just kind of a watered down version of it because we want to keep things light. And at the same set, the moments where there's on screen there's a real and true like reverence going on, and a kind of a loving experiential with regard to the process of the cooking. For example, I didn't want to just play irony in these moments, or or a pretentiousness or whatever. I really wanted to genuinely portray that sentiment. So I think just kind of being very earnest about all the moves, depending on what it was that was going on from moment to moment, was how I did it.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because it's a bit hard to talk to you about this film because I don't want to spoil like things that happen.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, I don't want to spoil the beats, but
You can't say anything.
I can't say too much at all. But this, like, I think it is fair to say the chef in this film is a performer, is an artist, is a storyteller as well in how he prepares his menu. And there, like, with him as well as the people dining, there is a real sort of pretension and a real sort of artifice, and you see these sort of themes of pretension and earnestness come through in the story of the film as well. So it's interesting to hear how that's sort of also seeping into how you're thinking about the score. Like, how much could you relate to this chef in terms of maybe the amount of thought that goes into his performance and art that he's trying to pull off?
I feel like there's a very obvious sincerity to everything he's doing. Obviously, he's also a cult leader who is entirely deranged and drinking his own Kool-Aid. So there's that. I mean, it's a caricature of itself. It's an absurdity, but in the world that it presents, it all makes perfect sense. And so when you step inside its bubble, it all, for me, like that's the whole key, is like this exists in here, and it all plays, it all feels real. So do I relate with being a deranged cult leader, like with the self-immolation and all the rest? No, but do I know what it feels like to lovingly prepare the object of one's craft? Very much so. And so yeah, I can, it's not a stretch.
Yeah, and is there a risk for any artist or performer to sort of get so caught up in their own Kool-Aid and their own sort of bubble of what they're creating that they sort of lose the joy in what they're actually creating?
It's a very common trope.
Mm.
That's another thing that this is not novel, and that's why, I mean, why it feels real. It's certainly within artistic circles. It's something that especially with success, that many people complain about, and age. I don't know. That's a whole other can of worms. That's an enormous subject. But yeah, it's there's certainly a lot of there.
Yeah. And it was like, I guess, sort of also as an artist and a performer, Colin, is like, because the film also touched on themes of like perfection and trying to be perfect with things. Can that be a bit get in the way of your art? This sort of striving to be perfect and have the perfect score for a film?
I think that you have to, I mean, anything, I guess the easy answer is everything has to be balanced, but you really do have to have a heaping amount of kind of like a self-determination and confidence in the vision, as well as a kind of equally heaping amount of crippling self-criticism. You have to be driven in one direction and believe wholeheartedly that what it is that you're making is precious, and at the same time be constantly questioning it. And if ever one tips in the direction too much in one of those directions, then yeah, I think things can very, we've seen it countless times. Things can go poorly with one's ability to create, if you are quite literally like uh driven to those kind of roadblocks that block because of your indecision and self-critique, then obviously you've tipped too far in that direction. But if your confidence is unchecked and there is no part of you that remains discerning enough to know when it is that the thing that you made really is not doing what it needs to do, then yeah, that's the other problem. I think really just, if, and this is trite, but a key could be that just remembering all these things as being outside of yourself and not part of any amount of what we associate with ego. And when we just can examine them as objects, we can be a little bit more discerning and a little bit more honest, and when something's doing what it needs to do, or not doing what it needs to do.
Colin, where do you find joy in performance and in composition?
Oh, I mean, it's everywhere. That's why I do it.
Yeah.
In performance, it's there's a very different kind of joy. It's visceral. It's in the experience. It's in the physical. It's in the urgency of that moment, and the kind of the entirety of that moment, and to the dissolution of everything else in the world and in the past and the future. The music, the performing of it there's an immediacy to it that's undeniable, and very intoxicating. And then for composition, there are moments like that, but more so the thrill and joy of composition, I find, is it's not only world building, the conception of and then gradual creation of something out of nothing. These these finished structures, but um, um, also the puzzles of it all. I find, especially scores, but I mean everything to a certain extent, is there's a puzzle to it, unlocking what indeed it needs to do with the course of a record, the arc of a record, anything. There's a certain kind of problem solving that comes into play, and with the score it's very much that, where it's how do we get this, how do we get from A to B, how do we tell this story without like I said earlier, without becoming kind of unruly, without using too many disparate elements, without being flabby about it, without being flashy about it, without attracting too much attention, doing just what's necessary in a kind of like concise and aesthetically beautiful way. So yeah, I love it.
And Colin, just in one sentence, what is your favorite thing about the menu? What do you love most about this film?
Oh, um, well, I mean, in like the most general terms, the thing that I love the most about it is that I haven't seen it before. I haven't seen this story told exactly this way, and that's a rarity in a world of of a lot of recycled storytelling. And so that's my favorite thing. There, that said, in more specific, there are a couple moments which, because I won't spoil them, but there are a couple moments for me that are so real that every time I see them in this film, I am just blown away by that, by the kind of humanity in them, and so I do love that. That's something that draws me to a story, to these kinds of stories to begin with, is having that being able to cover this one covers a lot of ground, and it's really quite impressive in how much fun it ends up being.
Yeah. Covers a lot of ground and most of it takes place in one room. So it's very, very cool.
Yeah.
Colin, thank you so much for chatting with us today. People watching this interview can go to goldderby.com to make your awards predictions and join the discussion in our forums. And yeah, Colin, all the best of luck with the upcoming Oscars and other awards you have down the pipeline. And yeah, all the best of luck for the menu. It was great.
Thanks so much, Matt. Appreciate it.